Can everyone hear me? Cool. All right. How's everyone doing? Good? Are we still excited about this summit? I certainly was very excited. The only reason I came to Argentina was for this summit, to be honest, before I even knew I was going to give a talk. So very excited to be here, and congrats to Gary and Leandro and the folks. That was super interesting. So thanks for running us through that. The talk I'm going to give is going to be a bit different in that I'm going to give you the perspective, from Alchemy. So actually, can we go? I have the clicker, so I'll go back one slide. We don't have the name of the slide. It is called TBD. It was going to go one or two ways. I was going to share how Alchemy infra is built and how we interact with nodes. I thought, okay, that's interesting. I can talk about it afterwards if you guys are interested. But instead, we have really cool insights running these binaries and clients at scale. Something, what I noticed the client teams don't always have visibility into. So I wanted to kind of give you guys insights into what we're seeing at Alchemy. Cool. So that'll be my talk. A bit about myself. I've been in this space for a while. I first started in the Oracle space, so I spent multiple years bringing off-chain data on-chain, first with an extension to the TLS protocol, and then being CTO, a co-founder of a company I created afterwards. And I joined Alchemy roughly, it's getting close to 4 years at this point. So I've been very involved with the engineering work we've done in Alchemy, and also working with our largest teams and the way they interact with Alchemy as a provider. So I'm happy to talk about all this afterwards as well. So I'm going to be here all day, so please come say hi. Cool. All right, let's get into it. So kind of 4 sections. I actually did the slides this morning, so I think I beat Marius to it. That's also why there was TBD on the slides. But I wanted to break this down in mostly 4 parts. I think insights is probably going to be the most relevant for client teams here in terms of what are we seeing. Since we started Alchemy, we've seen trillions of requests. So it's really cool data that we have there. And then also wanted to highlight some of the custom work that we have done on some methods. I'll touch on this in a bit. And then also give you a sense of what we would love to see and work on with you guys, right? Like from the client team perspective, and then future plans and where we can continue giving you more insights. That's something we started doing with some of the client teams, but I'd love to expand that to more teams as well. Cool, so just some numbers. We're processing, billions of requests a month. Since we started, I mentioned this, trillions of requests total. We support 80 networks. At this point, frankly, I stopped counting. I think the number is actually much higher. But we built infrastructure in such a way that we can extend rapidly to support more networks. And then I put here 20 plus binary clients if you count for the forks. I was trying to pull the number actually, talking to the team earlier this morning. But I actually think it's more. Like since I've been there, certainly seen a range of clients and ranges of forks that we have given the amount of networks we scaled on. So, and then in terms of where our infra is deployed today, we run these binaries in 4 regions, and we're also able to, on a per customer basis, extend that out to other regions. So we have data in these geographies as well. Cool. So in this insights bucket, we have a ton, and I'll also have a slide to show you the other insights we have. And please come talk to me if you're interested in some additional numbers. For this talk, I want to scope it to 2 main buckets, kind of give you a sense of, okay, like what does the method distribution look like? Gary touched on the linear airdrop and having a ton of ETH calls. Directionally, that's also what we're seeing. And also give you a sense of like, are these requests actually mostly close to the latest block, or are they distributed, like archive requests or hitting blocks that are, let's say, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 blocks in the past. So hopefully this is helpful. And again, if you have other thoughts after this, please talk to me, and I can share more data. Cool. So I'll start with this slide here. To start, I will say, like, when I was pulling these numbers up, the top 10 methods in usage account for 90–95% of the overall usage, and the largest chunk is ETH calls. So to me, it seems like most people probably have that intuition, like if you're interacting with a node in terms of like what the distribution might look like. You might not see this at the scale that we're seeing it, so hopefully this is useful as well. This is on Ethereum mainnet, though the distribution looks relatively similar on other networks. So these are really like, this is a percentage, so really it actually, when I pulled the number up, I knew it was high. I didn't think it was that high, like 53% is actually huge. So, any work that we've seen on binaries that improve that performance, obviously for end users, that's a huge win. And then you obviously have your ETH block by number, ETH balance. I listed ETH chain ID here. Actually, on the Alchemy side, we actually cache this and serve it at a different layer, but you get the idea. So yeah, if you want to take a photo as well, you're more than welcome to. But these are interesting numbers that ultimately I think we will make these more public, but for now I guess you're the first to see them. Cool. And then the second thing I want to touch on is, I alluded to this early on, is the block distribution. So what are the most common access patterns that we see large teams use? The vast majority of requests today hit basically within we have that granularity to see which blocks are being accessed relative to the latest block that we're also aware of. So 80% of requests actually will be hitting, let's say, latest block minus 100 blocks, if that makes sense. And then we also have 20% so of calls past this 100 block. Now, there are a few call outs which I actually should have listed here. Is I showed you early on, this is heavily swayed by the ETH calls. Given they represent the vast majority of our calls, right, like 50%, that drives up this number on the left, the 80%, because the ETH calls, if you were to look at ETH calls specifically, 90% of the requests are within the last 100 blocks. So you know, people are reading data off the blockchain and they're looking to get the latest state. But if you actually exclude ETH calls, 60% of requests are within the 100 blocks of the latest block. So you do see some variance there. So I listed some examples here, mostly for teams that are looking to backfill data from, let's say, the Genesis block to the latest block, or you know, debug or ETHCAT block receipts. The numbers are actually very different. You know, you only see roughly 40% of requests within 100 blocks. So yeah, there's some variance there, and again, we have that granularity and something to share. So one call I do want to mention as well is we run a mix of full and archive nodes for multiple reasons. Historically, we're pretty keen on only running archive nodes for the operational complexity, meaning it was easier for us to spin out archive nodes even if there was, you know, the syncing time and so on. We've actually moved to running a mix of full and archive nodes recently for performance reasons. How am I doing on time? I know there's no... Okay, cool. All right, so more data. These are examples of things that we can share with a caveat that we only, for some of these data points, we only store that data for 7 days. But we're able to, you know, share the method distribution. I call it the block distribution, though I think, you know, there's probably a better word for it. The latencies that we're seeing across various clients that we run, the error rates, be it the status codes, the node error codes, the RAM CPU usage that we see across multiple hardware types. I didn't touch on WebSockets here, but we also see, you know, we have details on what the subscriptions are most used for. And then I really wanted to add a slide on logs. I think it's actually super interesting to understand like the query patterns, what people are actually doing for logs in terms of the typical block ranges, the most common topics, and so on. I didn't have an opportunity to do that, but we do have some data. It's a bit tricky to pull, but we're able to get that as well. And I mentioned this as well. We have per network, per method, per binary granularity, so we can slice and dice this data as needed. Cool. Okay. So the second thing I wanted to talk about is the custom work that we've been doing. So by custom work, I mean we've been in situations at times where customers have asked us, or teams have asked us to support a method before the actual binaries might support them, right? So an example I listed here is Alchemy get transaction receipt. I'll touch on that in a second, and then ETH raw transaction sync, which is a more recent one. We have more examples, but these are two, I think, really cool examples. So on Alchemy get transaction receipts, so I have the chart here, but I don't know how familiar people are with it, but historically, if you wanted to fetch all the receipts in one call for a given block, you mostly would have to fetch the block itself, get the transactions, and then, you know, for each transaction, call ETH get transaction receipt, or you could batch the calls, but it was still pretty painful for teams to use. So in 2022, pretty early on, we launched our own method, so to speak, that basically did that under the hood. So it would, you know, do the batching. It would fetch the transactions in a block. It would do the batching, call the receipts, and return it to the end user. So that's this orange line that you see down here at the bottom. That's the Alchemy specific method. And at the time, there was actually, you can't even see the blue line, but there were some clients that supported ETHCAT block receipts, which was pretty new. And we saw 15 times more usage on our method than the binary one. But the moment actually there was increased excitement in this space and more binaries supporting it, I mean, you can see this like skyrocket in terms of the usage. In fact, I've been recommending to teams to use the native method, so to speak, not the Alchemy specific one, in part because teams want redundancy, they want fallbacks, they sometimes run their own nodes as a fallback. I'm very keen on having the binaries support these use cases. And I'm showing this more so to say, I think we have a very good perspective working with a range of teams around what these teams might need. And going forward, I'd love to push forward more methods or share some of this data early on, right? Like there's probably a delta between 2022 and 2024 here, 2 years from the moment ETH block receipts actually became popular and implemented across clients. But I think, look at this graph, fantastic. ETH block receipt goes up, and then we're basically going to eventually deprecate Alchemy get transaction receipt. All right, this is also an interesting one. You might have heard of it. If not, EthSend raw transaction sync is a way for, well, maybe taking a step back. Historically, if you are sending a transaction, oh, I need the water. Thank you. I know I have 5 minutes left as well, so I do want to touch on this. Cool, so historically, if you were to send a transaction and then get the receipt back, what you would do is you would use the send raw transaction to send a method, and then you would pull for a receipt. Now with the introduction of flash blocks, where blocks are sub 200 milliseconds, a lot of teams don't necessarily want to do this polling because the overhead that you incur polling for a receipt from a performance or latency standpoint will impact you. So one thing that we did actually pretty early on when the spec was still very early, we worked with Sam, Hai, and the Rise team to build this in our routing or blockchain engine before the binaries ended up supporting it. And now as more teams are rolling out, I know Geth rolled it out very recently. Reth also supported it. I think Aragon also has it too, if I'm not mistaken. We've been effectively just routing the request directly to the underlying binary, but we do have this ability where it makes sense and to support the teams that use us to build some of that functionality in our layer, in our blockchain agent to start, right? My personal opinion is we prefer not to do that, right, for compatibility reasons. So in this case, we worked super closely with them to make sure that whatever we were building was spec compliant until the binaries caught up. Cool. I listed some other type of work that we did as well. We pushed, this is huge kudos to the Geth team as well, like in adding block timestamp to ETH logs based on a ton of requests for the teams that were using us. Also work with the Geth team to optimize the archive node performance on base specifically. And an example of the data we had shared with the Geth team, again, is for ETH proof. The team was looking to figure out, what was the block range that they should support, or for how many blocks they support ETH proof. So we work with them on that as well. Is this the end? Oh no, okay. Just a little ambiance here. Wish list. All right, cool. This is, I'll be pretty brief. If I were to classify 2 buckets of things that I'd love for us to partner on with the client teams is standardizing error codes. I think one of the biggest blockers right now is client diversity and having us running clients. Having done this with Reth, where we worked with them to close 40 differences with Geth, is there are nuances, very often quite painful, between the types of error codes or error messages returned from a client to the next. So standardizing that for the community, I think, would be awesome and would greatly increase the client diversity. There's an initiative to do this. I know there's a PR like from a few months back around this, and there's also the RPC standards call that happens bi-weekly on Mondays where that has been talked about, but so far it's still pretty early on. And then another piece is more so around tracing. There are some nuances from a client to the next around the debug and namespaces. Beyond the differences between each namespace that is expected, some clients might return different data if you use the same method within these tracing namespaces. So I would say these, broadly speaking, are the 2 things that we think would be a huge benefit to the space if we were able to standardize this. Cool, so future plans on our side. Oh, it changed the emoji as well, interesting. We're going to continue investing in best-in-class performance. From our standpoint, that means building really scalable and reliable infra. We're going to continue investing in client diversity. Especially on the execution side, we actually do a very good job already. I think on the consensus side, we can certainly improve. And then we have 2 functionalities that we've been building over the past few months. One is benchmarks. Our process to benchmark nodes is fairly manual today, where we built a system to automatically and run load tests on various binary clients over various configurations of hardware. So I'm also happy to discuss this. And ideally, the goal is we benchmark these clients on our side and can share the data with you guys if you're interested. Another thing we worked on is a more granular traffic shadowing where we can mirror real-world traffic that we're seeing on Alchemy to a set of binaries. So we're able to do that. And then the other thing that we have, a few people are aware of it because we don't really advertise it. We also have a Alchemy snapshots where we're starting to add more and more snapshots to help the community. And then I listed this last item as TBD. When I say reports, I'd love for us to, as a company, be more public about some of the insights that we have or share more blogs around the performance that we're seeing from various clients. You guys tell me if this would be useful, but that's something we're also thinking about. And I had two small things I did want to highlight. A lot of people ask me, hey, like, what clients do you run? What versions you're running and so on. We actually had added a changelog or more detailed changelog, so to speak, 3 months ago. It's at alchemy.com/doc/changelog, so you can also have a look there. And then the other thing I just touched on as well is we, at alchemy.com/snapshots, we've started adding snapshots for multiple clients. Cool, that's it. I did want to take 1 minute to thank Sina and the EF team for organizing this. This is awesome. I hope this continues, and it's awesome to see so many people so early on. So thanks for running this. I mentioned the Geth, Aragon, Reth, Lighthouse teams, but frankly, there's so many other teams that we work with that I feel almost bad having to highlight a few, and everyone building the ecosystem, thanks so much for the work you're doing.
Excellent, Bastien. I'll have you move to the center of the stage here. We do have a number of questions from the audience here, and people have figured out the polling system in here to start ranking them here. Let me start with the first question here, which is, do you run your infra yourself, colo, or do you use a cloud provider?
Oh yeah, that's an interesting one. We actually migrated from AWS roughly a year ago to fully bare metal. We have some really cool stories around this. To keep it simple, it was both for performance and cost reasons, and also we rebuilt our stack to easily deploy it to other regions if we do need to.
Do you use a single or multiple clients for mainnet?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that's where the standardization come in play. For every network, we tend to run 2 binaries, but we route traffic usually to one client. Our decision there is mostly driven by performance because that's what the end users of Alchemy are looking to take advantage of, though we do have redundancy for client diversity.
Besides the redundancy of the setup, do you modify them in any way?
No, in the 4 years I've been at Alchemy, there was, I think we had modified Bohr in the past, and we had also contributed to, our team had contributed to changes at the level DB level. But I would say no, directly we try and avoid having to modify the clients.
Okay, and then based on the patterns you see, do you have any change recommendations for the RPC, structural or otherwise?
I think, so it's interesting because I was showing the method distribution where ETH goals is directionally the largest request. By that, interesting though, other methods that weren't even on that slide are equally important for teams. Come talk to me. I'm happy to talk about some of the changes I would suggest. I think it's pretty nuanced and depends on what we're talking about specifically.
Okay. Can you share the ratio of full node to archive nodes?
Yeah, actually, I don't have that top of mind. Historically, it was fully archive nodes. Pretty much, we had very few full nodes. But we did experience issues as there's been more network activity, specifically on base, that basically got us back to run full nodes. I mentioned this early on as well. The idea was to simplify our deployment of nodes, and we did a ton of work as well to sync nodes in a very efficient and quick manner. But I would say it's still pretty archive node dominant, I would say.
Okay, and then last question for you. Are the implementations of your custom RPC methods, are they open source?
They are not open source, and frankly, it's at times almost a stopgap to solve for a customer needs or teams that do need them until clients, the binaries themselves implement it. And in the case of ETH and raw transaction sync, we pretty much just follow the specs. So.
Okay, perfect. Please, another round of applause here.